Hi, you're listening to It Happened to Me, a rare disease and medical challenges podcast. The mission of our podcast is to support you, our listeners, and to create community as you confront the toughest challenges in life. All of us will experience health hardships. The real question is how we adapt. That's the focus of It Happened to Me, which wants to help you overcome limitations and live a full and satisfying life. Drawing on their own health challenges, co-hosts Kathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman interview guests who share stories and research to help you succeed in the face of difficult health obstacles. It happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.
Joining us in this episode today is Zach Shipp. He is the son of Sherry Shipp, who we interviewed in a previous It Happened to Me episode. And for those of you who haven't seen this episode yet, definitely check it out. As a freshman in college, Zach received a life-saving kidney transplant from his mom, Sherry, after experiencing end-stage renal failure. About 10 years later, he also suffered an acute instance of encephalitis inflammation, which led to a stroke in his eye, causing him to lose most of his eyesight, much of his hearing, and several other neurological symptoms.
After recovering from the physical and balance-related challenges, Zach has been able to adapt to his new way of living, returning to work full-time and enjoying some newfound hobbies like blind baseball and disabilities advocacy work. He is the director within the finance organization at Harry's Inc., where he has served in various leadership roles within finance. Prior to joining Harry's, Zach was a management consultant leading large-scale projects and teams for companies ranging from $200 million to $7 billion in revenue, specializing in CFO advisory for FTI Consulting, where he started as an intern while studying at the NYU Stern School of Business. Welcome to the show, Zach. We're thrilled to have you here.
Zach,
Thank you
welcome
so much.
to the show. Welcome. We are so happy to have you. You know, Kathy and I love all our guests, but it's really fun to have a friend on the show. So Zach and his mother, Sherry, are family friends. So this is really an honor for me to introduce you today, Zach. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you both.
Yeah,
Thank you for that exceptionally warm welcome and extremely complimentary. I feel like a celebrity. That was like the most prodigious welcome I could have possibly imagined. So thank you. And just before we get started, I want to thank you both for the work you do with this podcast and creating the community and safe place for folks to get support and hear stories. And I think it's amazing. I'm a beneficiary of it. And I just wanted to thank and recognize you both. So thank you.
aren't you kind, Zach?
Thank you.
That is very kind of you. So Zach, can you tell us a little bit about you, how old you are and where you live and work?
Sure. I am 31 years old. For those who are visually impaired, I'm a 6'2", 210-pound, athletically built gentleman with blue eyes and sort of medium length, curly-ish, wavy brown hair.
A hunk.
I live in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn here. With my fiance. I love a lot about life. I'm a pretty hungry person, both physically in terms of food, as well as the things that I enjoy doing in life. So I would say I'm the kind of person that I have two modes. I'm either 100% into something or I'm 0%. So whether that's sports, whether that's food and cooking and finding new restaurants or traveling and having different experiences. That's how I would sort of describe myself.
You love life.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. You love life, Zach. So your story starts with a tragedy, Zach. Can you tell us about your father, John?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was my hero, and still is my hero. He um, was a professor of oral medicine at New York University, where he also ran a research clinic, um, and did pretty groundbreaking research into basically oral maxillofacial surgery as well as geriatric dentistry. Literally wrote the textbook on geriatric dentistry and was one of the few people I've met, I think, in my life that were so exceptionally successful, both professionally as well as a father, as a husband, as a son, and just like a really amazing human being. So my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I believe he was 47 or 48 at the time. And he was, I mean, he was the image of health. So he was a world-class rower. He rowed crew in college, ended up in the Maccabea Games and won gold for Team USA, ran marathons, I mean, was literally looked like Superman. So that's, for me, that was, who I had to look up to as a child, and was so lucky to be able to do that. And so when he was diagnosed, it was a shock to, I mean, everyone. And yet he was the kind of person that was very much of the mindset of like, hey, like, this isn't a why me, like, why not me? If anyone can handle this, can figure this out, and, navigate the challenges that come with this, I can do it. That was, I think, very much my first lesson in how to navigate adversity in a, I think, not just stoic, but like humanistic and honest way is how he always approached things. So for me, he was a larger than life figure. And, even, in the 16 months that he battled lung cancer, there was not a single complaint. It was always, how do I, best support and love my family and live a life that is as fulfilling as it can be. So, when he passed away, when he was 49, I was a freshman in high school at the time. That was really, I think, like my first real, I would say, test of dealing with real adversity. And the model I had to work on was my dad. So, I feel like for me, it was certainly in a lot of ways is still the saddest thing that's ever happened to me. I think about him every single day, but I think he gave me the roadmap for how to go through the grieving process. And it was one of, I can feel sorry for myself and be sad and let that consume me. 14 years old, why should I have to bury my father? But I could also feel, lucky to have had such a incredible person to learn from and look up to for 14 years of my life. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't have that kind of role model, let alone someone as close as their father. So, I made a concerted effort to like make myself think about like, wow, how lucky was I to have such an amazing person in my life that will always like be with me. And whether he's here physically or even just like in my heart, that was the gift he gave me.
Wow.
And just for those in our listening audience, Zach is the splitting image of his. He is.
Well, that is such a beautiful testament to your father. And I think he's so proud of you and smiling down on us right now. And there's so much beauty in what you've just said. That's beautiful. But I got to say, I want to ask, while your mom was in the hospital taking care of your dad, one day you just happened to have a urine test in school as a prerequisite for sports. And what was that test? And what was the result? And what did it mean?
Sure. So I was in eighth grade and I was getting ready to play, sports for my middle school baseball team. And part of the requirements are to go through, urine testing. And so when the results came back, it showed that I had elevated levels of protein in my urine, which led to a series of follow-on urine exams, blood exams, each of which sort of pointed in the direction that, there's elevated levels of protein in my urine and there's basically elevated blood markers that would indicate some sort of kidney issue. And so we conducted a further set of blood tests and then a biopsy of my kidney, which resulted in a diagnosis of something called membranous nephropathy, which is a idiopathic. So we don't know what caused it, but it's a kidney disease that basically affects the membranes of a kidney. And what'll happen is the membranes end up leaking proteins into the urine, which in doing so then damages those nephrons, those basically aspects of the kidney, and thus damaging the kidney and hurting your kidney function.
Huh.
So, Zach, at 14, you're diagnosed with this disease, and it's an autoimmune disease. And so, once again, to our listening audience, these pesky autoimmune diseases keep cropping up, and we don't know why. Why does the body attack itself? But it does. And so, in this instance, the body is attacking the kidneys. So, here you are, you're 14 years old, and you have a diagnosis. So how did this diagnosis affect you at that time, and what sort of side effects did you have?
Yeah, so I would say that, I fortunately had it's interesting because it was sort of concurrent with my father's battle with cancer. And so in the backdrop, my dad was getting chemotherapy on a regular basis. By the way, did not miss a single day of work until about 2 weeks before he passed away. So, my dad was powering through that. You can do whatever blood tests you want on me. And so I think for me, like, I was actually pretty fortunate to have that piece of context to at least just think about my own diagnosis. And so I think that was like the frame of mind that I came at things with. In terms of how the kidney disease was presenting itself, we experienced a few sort of acute incidents of what's called like a nephrotic syndrome, effectively just like a flare up of the kidneys. And so it presented itself in a few ways. My freshman year of high school, it ended up resulting in basically my body filling up with this fluid called edema, everywhere from my stomach to my legs, my feet, kind of everywhere in my body. And I ended up having an extra like 30 pounds of water.
Oh my goodness.
Also coincided directly with the junior varsity tryouts and when I was in ninth grade for baseball.
Oh gosh.
I went through the tryouts and I ended up making the team.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
And then the next day went to the emergency room and basically underwent treatment to remove all this edema. And yeah, I came out feeling a hell of a lot lighter.
Yes.
But also, again, this was the spring of 2008. My father was progressing in his illness, and my focus was on, first it was making this baseball team, doing everything I could to become a active and high performing member of that team. And then also, being there with my family and with my dad to support him with what he was going through.
So let's fast forward, and you graduate from high school and you go on to college and you go to NYU, which is where your dad taught, which had to be a source of comfort. And what happened to you at the end of your freshman year in college?
Yeah, so I mentioned that instance of nephrotic syndrome. At various other stages, I would have similar instances. And And such an instant occurred at the end of my senior year of high school, such that, I was I basically got a pretty severe migraine from the kidney disease that led to, I won't get too graphic, but throwing up so
Yeah.
severely that it tore my
Oh.
esophagus and
Oh.
a lot of
Oh,
throwing up blood. So that was the
Oh.
point where we ended up switching from a pediatric nephrologist or pediatric kidney doctor to an adult nephrologist. It sort of was a line in the sand. Okay, you need to
Yeah.
start to see an adult serious nephrologist. And we went to the Columbia nephrology department and had a wonderful kidney doctor there, but he effectively said, like, hey, this disease that you've had, I know you're like a big, strong kid playing sports, but like we need to take this a lot more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a sort of inflection point. We, started on a series of infusion therapies to try to control the progression of the disease. And that basically persisted throughout my freshman year of college.
Mm.
Unfortunately, those infusions were effectively unsuccessful. So I ended my
Mm-hmm.
freshman year, I ended finals in May, and was getting blood tests at that point, probably weekly. And
Mm.
basically, what they showed was my kidney function was right around like 30%. And
oh,
the idea was, that's not great. And we need
Right.
to do everything we can do to maintain that 30%. And so that spurred on a basically set of, I would basically inject myself with this steroid um, fluid every 2 days.
Oh my goodness.
And so the idea was, okay, this should hopefully help maintain that 30%. We just need to maintain that.
Right.
wow.
About 3 weeks later, we get my blood test back, and my kidney function was at 8% kidney
Oh
function,
boy.
Oh,
um, which meant that I was in end stage renal failure,
Renal failure. Yes.
and was basically told you need a transplant or else.
Yeah.
wow. Well, at 19, you're told you're in renal failure. What does that look like? How are you feeling? How are you symptomatic?
Sure. So, um, I would say so in terms of like the physical presentation, my body was not able to really process any toxins. All of the toxins get processed in your kidneys, and filtered out through your urine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my kidneys were not functioning, and thus none of those toxins were being filtered out, and they were just remaining in my body. So I was again filled up with all this water weight and fluid. I was feeling exhausted and lethargic
Oh.
and just like not feeling well. So, um, the diagnosis was shocking. This was 19 years old. I just finished my
Yeah.
freshman year, a great
Mm.
year of college. I loved being a student at NYU, and I just wanted to be a normal,
Sure.
quote unquote, college kid. And
Yes, of course.
I think I had like some certainly naive sentiment that, like, the powers that be, my dad's looking out for me, like I'm gonna be fine no matter what it is, like I've got help. And this was a real wake up call in that, like, guess what? Like, shit happens. And it was a shocking moment. So, we received that diagnosis. It was like the first or second week of June. And yeah, I pretty quickly went into a pretty, I would say, like, depressive state. It was
Yeah.
a factor of, you know, the shock and horror of, like, someone just told me I'm literally dying, and
Mm-hmm.
like don't really have a great chance unless we get a transplant.
Mm.
As well as just like my body wasn't filtering out any toxins, so I felt horrible. So we found out about the diagnosis, and immediately my mom was like, well, I want to do it. I want to give up my
Oh,
kidney.
oh,
And fortunately, she was a match, and
amazing.
that very much saved my life. So,
Yeah.
you know, there was a 1 month period between the diagnosis and when we were actually transplanted.
Mhm.
Um, and that was one of the hardest months of my life.
Yeah.
I was still doing the steroid injections. Um, I was not able to sleep really at all because of them. They keep you up all night.
Yes. Yeah.
And on top of that, I was just like feeling horribly.
Yeah.
Um, and, we'd have to go to the doctor like twice a week.
Hmm.
And it was really just to like confirm that I'm still breathing.
Yeah.
And we'd sit in the doctor's office, and people would just start talking, and it was always like, oh, that's so nice, like you're here with your mom, you're here for her to support her. And I was just like, no, like I'm the sick one. I was the youngest person by at least 3 decades,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the feelings of like feeling sorry
Oh,
for yourself start to creep in.
Yes. Sure.
But my mom, being who she is, would just start talking to people, and and people would start to share their stories, and we would hear the most incredible and unbelievable stories about people who were miraculously saved by innocent events. This man from upstate New York was, for some reason, that day happened to be in New York City, had been on he did not have a match. And so he had been on dialysis and on the kidney transplant list for 6 or 7 years. And he thought that this was the end for him. And he
Mm.
randomly got a phone call and said, if you can be at Columbia in 45 minutes, we have a kidney for you. And
Oh my
sure enough,
goodness.
wow.
some
Oh.
six a 6-year-old girl in Washington Heights died in a car accident, and she
Oh
was
my
brain
goodness.
dead, but she was a kidney match for him, and that little girl saved this man's life.
Oh,
Oh,
And that's what he thinks about every single day when he wakes up. And
sure.
I heard that story, and honestly, like
Gave
many
you
others
hope.
like it, and
yeah.
you are just like, oh my gosh, like how can I sit here and feel sorry for myself? Like
Right.
I'm
Right.
19 years old. I'm alive. I have a live donor. It's my mother that is literally willing to like give me life again. Like
Oh,
there is there's so much more life to live, and I want to do that. And I don't want to do it in a state of feeling sad or sorry for myself. I want to live my life to the fullest because um that's what we're here to do. That's what I'm here to do, and I'm lucky to be
right.
able to do that. So that
Absolutely.
so that really spurred on, I think, that like change in mental outlook. And then the reality is, once we were transplanted, I started feeling better almost immediately.
Mm.
Um, so
Oh, really?
once the kidney goes in, I almost immediately started producing urine, and then the toxins start to get filtered out. So I also, had the benefit of uh, a lot of things, but an amazing, first of all, physician and surgeon and set of nurses to get me through that medically was I think first and foremost um, lucky incident number one. So, literally the day after my transplant, my nurse was like, "Okay, you're gonna sit up today, and
Hmm.
you're gonna go sit in that chair."
Wow.
And I was like, "I have like 40 stitches like right in my stomach and my waist. Like I can't move. Like what are you talking about?" And she's like, "No, you're a big strong guy, and you're gonna go up and you're gonna sit in that chair."
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Sure enough,
You
I
did
got
it.
my I got my ass in that chair.
Good for you. Yeah.
And then
That's terrific.
And then the next day it was, okay, you're gonna go for a walk. You're gonna walk in the hallway. And I was like, all right, okay, like the chair was one thing. I get it. We're recovering. Like I just like that's not I'm not gonna be able to do that. And she's like, yes, you are. And sure enough,
You did it.
you just start
You
pushing
did it.
yourself. And then the next day I was out of the hospital.
Unbelievable.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So, Zach, you're back in college in a month and a half, which I find remarkable. You think about this life-saving surgery that was so successful that you're back at school. So tell us, what is it like having this life-saving surgery and going back to school? How did you adapt? How did you take care of yourself in that environment?
Yeah, it was so getting back was not a given. I think for me, I wanted to do everything in my power to physically get myself where I needed to be to get back.
Yes.
And you know, thoughts of what things were like during the diagnosis of that sense of feeling sorry for yourself. Like I did not want that. And I knew like I
No.
needed to get back to school, not sit at home feeling sorry for myself. And so it was like pushing myself physically to make sure, obviously within whatever, medical constraints I had, to make sure that I was safely getting myself into the physical shape I needed. Unfortunately, we were able to get to the point where my doctors cleared me to go back, which was a huge, I think for me, a huge accomplishment, but also just reinforcement of, I think, a lot of what I had learned throughout my life, a lot of what my dad taught me, which was really about just like working hard and how to, he always taught me like there were folks in his medical school or in his field that had more, just like book smarts. They were more, they were smarter, but he wasn't gonna let them work harder than him. And I learned that from him. And so it was sort of a reinforcement of like, if you work hard enough, like you can achieve it. And so I think that lesson very much sort of got consolidated into my brain. And then actually being back, it's interesting. I didn't just gain a kidney from that experience. I think I gained a very different perspective on life, which itself wasn't new, right? Like for me, losing my father when I was 14, a freshman in high school, it just makes you different. You've gone through something that most kids don't go through. And I think that for me, like I carried that with me throughout the rest of high school. And I think in a lot of ways, like it gave me a huge amount of mental strength.
It sounds like it.
This
well, you really
experience-
grow up. You really grow up after having, so you've had a terrible tragedy losing your dad, and now you've gone through a life-saving surgery. You faced death, and right in the eye, you faced death. And,
exactly.
And you beat that.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Nothing is going to stop you now.
Yeah, and it was a feeling of like, and I feel this honestly, like I feel like I would wake up every day and think like, holy shit, like I shouldn't be here. And I am here. And, if I don't live today and have a great day and do things that bring me joy and fulfillment and meaning in life, like then what am I doing? Like I'm here to live and I'm lucky to be here and I'm gonna appreciate and live my life and day to the fullest.
Thank you for listening to this episode of It Happened to Me. We encourage you to learn more at ithappenedtomepod.com. Please use the contact form on our website to submit your guest suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, and feedback for the show. You can also email us directly at ithappenedtomepod@gmail.com. We would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app like Apple or Spotify. This helps others in the rare disease and medical challenge community find us. It Happened to Me is created and hosted by Kathy Gillenhorn and Beth Glassman. I'm Keir Deneen from DNA Today, and I serve as our executive producer and marketing lead. Amanda Andrioli is our associate producer. Ashlyn Anokian is our graphic designer. And remember, it happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.